The sun was bleeding out over the rim of the desert when Seraphine Ward rode into the abandoned salt flats. 30 years old, sharp-boned, and carrying a presence that made most men step aside, she looked like someone carved out of windswept stone and quiet storms. Her hat was pulled low, dust clinging to her long coat, and the muzzle of the revolver at her hip glinted. Like an eye that never blinked. She had come for him. A lone figure stood near the ridge, his silhouette hardened by the falling light. Kahto Blackthorn, an Apache wanderer whose name traveled through ranch towns like a rumor no one could confirm. Some said he was a ghost. Others said he was an outlaw. And one old rancher swore Kahto could track a man through a sandstorm with his eyes closed, but none of that mattered to Seraphine Ward. She had her own reason. Her boots hit the ground with deliberate weight as she dismounted. The heat rose around her in pale waves. Kahto didn't turn, didn't step back, didn't even reach for the long knife strapped to his thigh. "You came far," he said. His voice low, smooth, unreadable. Seraphine stepped closer, letting silence hang between them until she was sure he felt the tension she intended to bring. "I didn't come for talk," she replied. "I came for work." Kahto finally turned, his dark eyes fixed on her with a calm that unsettled even someone as controlled as she was. He looked powerful, lean, sinewed, and carrying a presence that made the dry wind itself hesitate. His hair fell down his back in black strands braided with bone and copper. His bare arms were marked with symbols she didn't recognize, symbols of storms, of mountains, of struggle. "And what is it," he asked, "that the lady wants from me?" Seraphine's jaw tightened. "Not lady. Not here," but she ignored the slip. "You will work for me," she said. His eyebrow lifted, amused. "Work for you?" he echoed, as though the idea were a harmless joke. She stepped closer, dangerously close. Close enough to see the thin scar running along his collarbone, the roughness of his hands, the steadiness of his breath. "Yes," she said. "Work for me, or—" She let her voice drop to a warning that held no softness. "You will pay for it." Kahto's expression didn't change, but something in the air did. The wind shifted. The earth felt suddenly aware. He studied her, measured her, the way a mountain lion might measure the step of someone walking too close. "And what price?" he asked quietly. "Do you think a man like me pays?" Seraphine held his gaze without wavering. "The kind you can't afford." A long silence stretched between them. He didn't flinch. She didn't blink. Finally, he broke the stillness. "If you think you can threaten me, I don't think," she cut in sharply. "I know." Her words hit him like a thrown knife, not in force but in certainty. She reached into her coat and held up something small, metallic, and heavy with consequence. A badge, a territorial marshal's badge. Kahto's jaw clenched. "Your law?" he said, voice lowering. "Not today," she answered. "Today I'm a woman who needs your skills. I'm not here to arrest you. I'm here because you're the only man in these lands who can track what I'm hunting." "What are you hunting?" he asked. Seraphine's eyes darkened, not just with anger, but grief, old and sharp as unhealed bone. "A man," she said. "A man who burned my ranch, stole my land papers, and vanished into the desert like smoke." Kahto crossed his arms. "And you think I will help you when you come to me with threats?" "You don't have a choice," she replied, stepping closer still. "Because the man I'm hunting is the same one who tried to kill you 6 months ago." A flicker, tiny but real, ran through his eyes. "How do you know that?" he asked. Seraphine let out a breath. "Because before he came for me, he left a message carved into my barn door." She paused, then said his name. "Rafe Corvan." Kahto's entire frame stiffened. So she was right. Rafe Corvan was his enemy too. Seraphine dropped the badge back into her coat and said the words that sealed their fate. "You will work for me, Kahto Blackthorn, one way or the other." The wind went still. The desert held its breath, and Kahto whispered. Then we started dawn. The first light of dawn crept over the desert like a thin blade pulling across the horizon. Seraphine Ward stood beside her horse, tightening the saddle straps with quick, efficient motions. She hadn't slept, couldn't sleep, not when the night had been thick with memories she'd spent months trying to bury. Kahto Blackthorn approached without a sound. He moved with the silent, natural rhythm of something born from the land, not walking on it. The rising sun ignited his long black hair and cast gold across the tribal jewelry resting against his bare chest. "You ready?" he asked. Seraphine turned sharply. "I've been ready since the day Rafe Corvan set fire to my life." Kahto studied her face. She wasn't trembling. She wasn't emotional. She was made of steel this morning. But he could see the residue of the sleepless night in the tension around her eyes. "You said Rafe carved a message into your barn," Kahto said. "Show me." Seraphine nodded and mounted her horse. Together, they rode across the silent stretch of land that used to be her world. The remains of Seraphine's ranch appeared like a graveyard someone had forgotten. Charred beams pierced the air like broken ribs. The soil was still blackened with soot, though the fire had happened months ago. Dust storms had smoothed the edges of destruction, but nothing could erase the wound. Seraphine dismounted without a word and walked toward the collapsed barn. Kahto followed at a distance, eyes sharp, scanning everything, the ground, the wind direction, the shifts in sand. She stopped at a half-burned wall still standing. Her hand, steady now, brushed the blackened wood. "There," she whispered. Kahto stepped beside her. The carving was deep, ragged, violent. "You can run from the dead, but not from what they owe. R.C." Kahto's jaw tightened as he traced a scarred finger over the letters. "He wanted you scared." "I'm not scared," Seraphine said. Kahto gave her a long, assessing look. "Everyone is scared of something." She didn't answer. Instead, she walked toward the ashes of her old home. Her boots left small prints in the soot. The wind carried faint smells of charcoal and burnt mesquite. Kahto crouched near the old porch, sliding his fingers through the dirt. "Tracks," he murmured. Seraphine turned. "Hold?" 6 days at most, Kahto replied. "Someone was here. Someone heavy-footed. Someone who didn't bother covering their trail." Seraphine's eyes sharpened. "Rafe," Kahto shook his head. "Rafe moves like a fox. These tracks are reckless. Angry, even." Seraphine stepped beside him. "Then who?" Kahto's eyes narrowed as he rose to his full height. "Someone working for him." Seraphine's stomach twisted, not with fear, but with a familiar heat she had been living with for months. "Rage. Rafe sends men ahead to stake out places he knows matter," Kahto said. "Your ranch meant something to him." Seraphine scoffed. "It meant he wanted me dead." Kahto shook his head slowly. "No, if he wanted you dead, you'd be dead. Burning your ranch wasn't about killing you." He paused. "It was about breaking you." Seraphine's eyes snapped to his. "He tried that with me," Kahto said quietly. 6 months ago. Burned the canyon camp my people used. Took something from me too." Seraphine's voice softened, unexpectedly. "What did he take?" Kahto didn't answer immediately. His jaw worked once, twice, as though deciding whether the truth was worth sharing. When he finally spoke, his voice held a rawness Seraphine hadn't heard before. "Someone I cared for," he said. "She died because of him." The world stilled. Seraphine's chest tightened, not from sorrow for his loss, but from recognition. Loss had a sound, a texture, a weight. She carried the same one. Kahto turned away before she could respond. He crouched again, examining another set of footprints lighter this time, quicker. "2 men," he said. Both moved east. Toward the canyons? Seraphine asked. Kahto nodded. That's where Rafe hides when he wants time to plan. Seraphine's hand drifted to the revolver at her hip. Then we ride. Kahto straightened and stepped in front of her, blocking her path. No, not yet. She glared at him. You said we start at dawn. And we have. But charging into canyon territory without supplies, without water, without preparation. I don't care. She snapped. Kahto's voice dropped, low and commanding. You will if you want to live long enough to face Rafe Corvan. Seraphine's breath caught, anger clashing with the cold, unshakable logic in his tone. He was right. She hated that he was right. He stepped closer. If you want my help, you follow my lead. Seraphine met his gaze, fire meeting stone. And if I don't? Kahto's expression remained unnervingly calm. Then you'll pay for it, he said, throwing her own warning back at her with quiet, devastating control. For the first time, Seraphine didn't respond. She just swallowed once and said, Fine, lead the way, Kahto Blackthorn. And they rode out, not as allies yet, but as two storms forced onto the same horizon. The sun rose higher, baking the ground in a pale gold haze as Seraphine and Kahto rode toward the canyons. The land shifted from flat, cracked desert to rugged stone ridges that looked like giant ribs piercing the sky. Ravens circled overhead, their shadows gliding across the horses' backs. Seraphine kept pace beside Kahto, though every muscle in her body wanted to push past him. She hated waiting, hated slowing down when her blood screamed to chase Rafe Corvan through the desert until her lungs burned. But Kahto had insisted on gathering supplies from a small, hidden trading post. Water, jerky, flint, a coil of rope, nothing extra, everything necessary. Now they were miles from it, entering a land where the wind itself seemed to warn them back. The canyons, Kahto said, pointing ahead. Don't behave like normal land. Sound moves strangely. Tracks disappear faster. And some parts? Swallow echoes. Seraphine raised a brow. Swallow echoes? You'll hear it yourself, Kahto replied. When a place is stained by enough violence, the earth remembers. It grows quiet. Seraphine scoffed lightly. The earth doesn't remember. Kahto glanced at her, unreadable. It remembers more than people do. They rode on until the path narrowed between two towering walls of red stone. Wind swept through the passage, carrying with it a faint chill. As they entered, Seraphine noticed something unsettling. Her horse's hooves made no sound. The canyon drank every noise, footsteps, breathing, wind. Even the metallic clink of Kahto's tribal jewelry vanished into the stillness. Seraphine's throat tightened. This place feels wrong. Kahto nodded. Rafe knows these canyons well. Too well. Seraphine looked at him sharply. You've been here with him? No, Kahto answered. I've been here because of him. She didn't ask what that meant. Something in his tone told her she wasn't ready for that answer. They rode deeper until the canyon opened into a wide basin shaped almost like a natural amphitheater. Scattered rocks formed strange patterns, circles, spirals, lines intersecting like a forgotten language. Kahto dismounted. Tracks end here. Seraphine followed. You sure? Kahto crouched and touched the dust lightly. 2 sets of footprints. Same men from your ranch. Their strides changed longer, faster. They were running. Running from what? Seraphine asked. Kahto didn't answer immediately. Instead, he examined a jagged mark on the canyon wall, a smear of something dark. Blood. Something hunted them, he said quietly. Not a man. An animal. Seraphine stiffened. Rafe keeps animals? Kahto shook his head. Not like this. This wasn't his doing. Seraphine walked the basin perimeter, scanning the ground. A cold feeling settled in her stomach, a whisper of danger, of being watched. "Kahto," she said suddenly, her voice low. "Look." She pointed to a patch of disturbed sand, a deep impression, larger than a man's boot. Kahto approached. He examined it carefully, tracing its edges. "A cat," he said. "Mountain lion. Big one. Tracking them." Seraphine frowned. Why would a mountain lion chase them deep into canyon territory? There's easier prey out in the flats. Kahto looked up at her. Because something drove it this way. The men? No, Kahto said. Something stronger. Seraphine swallowed. Rafe? Kahto didn't answer. His silence was enough. Suddenly, a faint sound sliced through the canyon, soft, trembling, almost human. A groan. Seraphine and Kahto locked eyes. Someone was alive. Without hesitation, they drew their weapons and moved toward the source, a narrow pass between boulders. The groan came again, clearer, pained. Kahto motioned for Seraphine to stay behind him. For once, she didn't argue. They slipped through the rocks until a small cavern came into view. Faint light leaked inside, illuminating a man slumped against the wall. One of Rafe's men. Or what was left of him. His shirt was torn, chest clawed, breaths ragged. His eyes fluttered open as they approached. "You?" He rasped, staring directly at Kahto. "You shouldn't have come." Seraphine crouched beside him. "Where is Rafe Corvan?" The man thrashed weakly. He's gone ahead. Deeper, where the canyon drops into darkness." Kahto pressed. "Did he send the lion?" The man coughed, shaking his head violently. "No lion, not a lion." His trembling hand lifted, pointing toward a shadowy opening at the back of the cavern. "He woke something. Something that sleeps under the stone." Seraphine stiffened. Kahto's eyes narrowed. "What did Rafe wake?" Seraphine demanded. The dying man's voice cracked, barely a whisper, the thing with no echo. His head slumped, breath leaving him for the last time. Silence swallowed the cavern. Seraphine and Kahto exchanged a single grave look. Whatever waited deeper in the canyon, Rafe Corvan had reached it first, and now they would have to follow. The cavern ahead of them breathed a cold neither of them expected. Seraphine Ward felt it slide across her skin like the brush of a winter river, unnatural, out of place in the red stone heat of the canyon. Kahto Blackthorn raised a hand, signaling her to stay still. His long black hair shifted in the thin light, the tribal copper pieces around his neck catching faint glints as he listened. Not with his ears, with his instinct. Something inside that cavern waited without breathing. Seraphine tightened her grip on her revolver. If Rafe Corvan went in there, then so do we. Kahto didn't turn. If he woke something, walking in without caution will kill us before we see him. Seraphine stepped closer, lowering her voice. "You're afraid." Kahto's jaw flexed. "I'm aware." Those two things in his world were not the same. The wind outside moaned across the canyon mouth, then died abruptly. No echo, no return, just silence settling heavy and absolute. Seraphine swallowed. "That's the second time you said Rafe woke something. You think this place holds—" "What, a beast?" Kahto finally faced her. This land belonged to the old people long before ranchers or soldiers. They spoke of something that sleeps under the stone, something that rises only when disturbed. Seraphine's skin prickled. "You mean a legend?" "Legends are warnings that survive longer than the people who told them," Kahto replied. Before she could argue, a faint scrape echoed from deep in the cavern. Both froze. It wasn't footsteps. It was the sound of stone dragging over stone. Kahto moved first. "Stay behind me." This time, Seraphine didn't argue. She followed him through the narrow stone throat of the cavern, each step carrying them deeper into a cold that felt like it seeped from the bones of the earth. The light dimmed. Shadows thickened. The air grew still enough to feel dead. Then, a faint glow appeared ahead. Seraphine's hand tightened around her revolver. Kahto flattened himself against the wall, motioning for her to do the same. They crept closer until the cavern opened into a vast underground chamber. Seraphine inhaled sharply. The chamber floor was carved with massive spirals, bigger versions of the patterns she'd seen outside. And in the center, at the edge of a rock ledge, a lantern flickered. Rafe Corvan's lantern. Beside it, a torn saddlebag. Papers scattered. A rifle leaned against a stone pillar. But no Rafe. Kahto scanned the shadows. "He's here," Seraphine whispered, "or whatever he woke is." Kahto motioned her toward the saddlebag. She crouched, quickly rifling through. Her fingers brushed a folded sheet, one of her stolen land papers. Her breath caught. "He still has my deeds. He didn't sell them. He kept them." Kahto crouched beside her. "That means two things. He wants something from your land. And he didn't plan to run far." Seraphine's frustration flared. "Then where is he?" Kahto's eyes lifted toward the cavern ceiling. "He went down." Seraphine followed his gaze to a crack in the stone floor, narrow but deep, leading into a lower tunnel that breathed cold air upward like the exhale of something sleeping. Footprints fresh led directly into it. Kahto touched the edge of the crack. His long fingers brushed something sticky and dark. Blood. He wasn't alone, Kahto murmured. Someone dragged something down there. Seraphine felt a tremor move through her. Dragged what? Before Kahto could answer, the lantern flickered violently once, twice, then went out. The chamber plunged into blackness. Seraphine stumbled back, heart pounding. "Kahto?" His voice was low, steady, close. "I'm here." But something else was too. A scraping sound echoed again, this time unmistakably closer. Kahto gripped her arm gently. "Stay silent." Seraphine's breath froze in her throat as a shape moved in the darkness, massive, shifting, crawling across the chamber with a weight that made the stone tremble softly. Kahto whispered, barely audible, "Don't run. It senses movement." Seraphine's pulse hammered. The scraping drew nearer, slow and deliberate. A rank, cold smell filled the chamber, earth, decay, something old enough to have no name. Then a faint glow returned. Not from the lantern. From two pale, colorless eyes staring at them from the dark. Seraphine's blood iced. Kahto slowly pushed her behind him, whispering, "That is the thing with no echo." The creature shifted, its shadow stretching across the spirals carved in the floor. It was larger than any mountain cat or wolf, and its shape was contorted, almost human in outline but wrong in every proportion. And where a mouth should have been, there was only smooth skin. "No echo," Kahto whispered again. "It cannot speak. It only listens." Seraphine's voice barely escaped her lips. "For what?" Kahto's eyes stayed locked on the creature. "For whoever woke it." Seraphine's breath trembled. "And Rafe Corvan woke it." Suddenly, the creature's head snapped toward the lower tunnel. Then toward them. Then it moved, fast. Kahto shoved Seraphine toward the wall. "Run!" he shouted. And the cavern erupted into chaos. The desert stretched endlessly under the relentless sun, the heat pressing down like a living thing. Seraphine's fingers brushed against the coarse leather of her gloves as she surveyed the small encampment Kahto had set up near the edge of a jagged canyon. Dust swirled around the horses tethered to wooden posts, and the faint clatter of metal tools reached her ears as Rafe worked near a makeshift forge. "You shouldn't be out here." "Seraphine," Kahto's deep voice rumbled from behind her. He was as imposing as ever, his broad chest glistening with a sheen of sweat, the tribal jewelry around his neck catching the sunlight. The wind is shifting. Could bring trouble? Seraphine's eyes didn't leave the horizon. Trouble seems to follow us no matter where we go, she said quietly. Her dark hair whipped across her face as the wind kicked up again. I'm not afraid, Kahto, but I can't ignore what's coming. Kahto's expression softened ever so slightly, though his jaw remained tight. You have courage? A fire that burns brighter than most. But even fire can be swallowed by the desert if it's not careful. He stepped closer, and for a moment she felt the weight of his presence, the raw strength that radiated from him. Then let me burn, Seraphine whispered, turning to meet his gaze. Let me fight for what I believe in. Kahto studied her, the golden light catching in his eyes. There was admiration there, but also a warning. He knew the dangers lurking beyond the canyon walls, knew the men who would follow them if they sensed weakness. And yet, he could not pull her back. Not when she had made her choice. Rafe approached, wiping soot from his hands onto a rag. His usually easy smile was gone, replaced with a grim determination. We need to move supplies to the northern ridge before sundown, he said, nodding toward the carts piled high with provisions. If we wait too long, the wind will bury us in sand, and the route will be impassable. Seraphine nodded and turned toward the carts. As she lifted one corner, Kahto appeared beside her, muscles flexing under the strain. Careful, he murmured, his hand brushing hers as he steadied the load. The touch was brief, fleeting, but it sent a shiver down her spine. They moved in silence, the sound of hooves and rattling wheels echoing through the canyon. Every shadow seemed deeper, every gust of wind more urgent. Seraphine felt the tension build like a living thing coiling around her heart. Something was coming. She could feel it, not just the wind, not just the desert, but something far more dangerous. By the time they reached the northern ridge, the sun was bleeding red across the horizon. Kahto surveyed the valley below, his sharp eyes scanning for signs of movement. We're not alone, he said, his voice low and certain. Seraphine's pulse quickened. Enemies? Kahto's gaze never wavered. Possibly, or worse. Hunters who don't know mercy. Rafe stepped forward, placing a firm hand on Kahto's shoulder. We can handle them, he said, though the tremor in his voice betrayed his own uncertainty. We've survived worse. Seraphine's fingers tightened around the reins of her horse. She felt the weight of responsibility settle on her shoulders. It was not enough to survive. She had to be ready to act, to protect Kahto, to protect Rafe, to protect herself. The desert did not forgive hesitation. Night fell suddenly, draping the canyon in darkness. Stars glittered coldly overhead, distant and unfeeling. Fires crackled at the base of the ridge, the only warmth in the encroaching chill. Seraphine sat near the largest blaze, her mind racing through strategies, contingencies, possibilities. Kahto joined her, settling down across the fire. For a long moment, they just stared at the flames, the heat between them more than the fire could provide. Tomorrow, Kahto said finally, we face the storm. Together. Seraphine met his gaze and nodded. Together. The wind howled through the canyon, carrying with it the scent of dust and danger. Seraphine felt it prickling against her skin, whispering promises of trials yet to come. But she was ready. She had no choice but to be ready. For Kahto, for Rafe, for herself. And somewhere deep in the desert, unseen eyes watched. The storm was coming, and it would not wait for anyone. The night was merciless. Cold winds cut through the canyon, carrying with them the scent of sand, sweat, and something foreboding. Seraphine pulled her shawl tighter around her shoulders, eyes scanning the shadows that flickered in the firelight. Across the ridge, Kahto Blackthorn stood like a sentinel, muscles taut beneath his bare chest, the tribal jewelry around his neck glinting with every flicker of flame. Rafe Corvan was nearby, hammering quietly at a repaired wheel on one of the carts, his face drawn with tension. He glanced toward Seraphine and Kahto, his brow furrowed. "You feel it too, don't you?" he asked quietly. Seraphine nodded. "Something's out there, watching." Her voice was calm, but her pulse thudded like a drum. "I can feel it in the wind." Kahto turned his gaze toward her, eyes dark and unreadable. "It's more than the wind. I've hunted through deserts, plains, and mountains. That is not ordinary." His voice carried weight, a warning wrapped in authority. "Stay close. Don't let it divide us." A sudden rustle in the underbrush made all three of them freeze. Seraphine's hand went instinctively to the knife at her belt. Kahto's hand hovered over his bow, the muscles in his arms coiled like springs. Rafe took a step forward, shielding her with his body. Then it emerged. Not a man, not a horse, but a figure wrapped in tattered black cloth, moving with the silence of a shadow. Seraphine's heart leapt, and Kahto's eyes narrowed. "Who goes there?" he called, his voice a low rumble that carried through the canyon. The figure stopped, tilting its head, revealing a face obscured by soot and scars. "I am the storm that follows," it hissed, voice like the scraping of metal against stone. "You trespass on lands you do not belong to, and you will pay the price unless you surrender what you carry." Seraphine felt a chill crawl down her spine. "We carry nothing of yours," she said, stepping forward, though her hand shook slightly. "We only seek passage. We will pay no price to shadows and threats." The figure laughed, a sound devoid of warmth. "Shadows?" it spat. "I am the reckoning. The desert remembers those who dare defy its will. You will learn that soon enough." Kahto moved beside her, a protective wall of muscle and presence. "No," he said firmly. "You will not touch her. Or Rafe, or me." He flexed, bow in hand, and the tension in the air thickened. "I have faced storms before. This one is no different." The figure paused, seeming to weigh Kahto's words against its own intentions. Then, with a swift movement, it vanished into the darkness, leaving a faint whisper in the wind. "You cannot run from me. The desert has eyes, and I will find you." Seraphine exhaled slowly, her body trembling slightly with relief and adrenaline. Rafe rubbed his jaw, muttering, "Great. Just great. Now we're being hunted by ghosts." Kahto's eyes never left the shadows. "No ghosts," he said quietly. "A hunter, and it knows the desert better than we do. We must move before dawn." They worked through the night, packing the carts with silent efficiency. Every sound, the crackle of fire, the jingle of Kahto's jewelry, even the distant howl of a coyote made Seraphine's nerves jump. Yet, despite the tension, she felt a strange certainty in Kahto's presence. He was a force she could rely on, a protector who carried the desert itself in his strength. As first light crept over the horizon, they mounted their horses. Kahto rode beside her, the wind tossing his long black hair like a banner of defiance. Rafe brought up the rear, tense but ready. The desert before them shimmered with the heat of the rising sun, but Seraphine's gaze was fixed forward, heart pounding with resolve. "We move fast," Kahto said, voice low but commanding. "If the storm follows, we need to be ahead of it." "Every moment counts," Seraphine nodded. "We'll survive. We've survived worse." Her voice carried a steel edge, a promise not just to herself, but to the two men who now depended on her as much as she depended on them. The canyon stretched endlessly before them, dangerous, beautiful, and unforgiving. And somewhere deep in its shadows, the storm waited, patient, calculating, ready to strike. But Seraphine, Kahto, and Rafe were not afraid. They had each other, and for now, that was enough. The desert sun had climbed high, blazing mercilessly over the canyon. But the real heat was in the tension that coiled around them like a living thing. Seraphine's horse moved cautiously, ears pricked, nostrils flaring, sensing the danger Kahto had warned them about. Beside her, Kahto Blackthorn's presence was a constant force muscles taut, eyes scanning every shadow, bow in hand, ready for the inevitable. Rafe Corvan brought up the rear, his jaw tight, hands gripping the reins like iron. "This is it," Kahto muttered, voice low and steady. "The hunter knows our path. It won't wait for us to be ready." Seraphine's heart beat faster, but her resolve was unwavering. "Then we face it," she said. "Together." The wind shifted suddenly, carrying a faint rustle, a whisper of movement from the canyon walls above. Kahto's eyes narrowed, and he raised a hand. "Hold!" From the shadows, the figure emerged no longer just a silhouette of cloth and menace, but a man, gaunt and feral, with eyes black as midnight. His approach was silent, deliberate, each step measured. The desert seemed to hold its breath as he drew near, his gaze locked on Kahto. "You've trespassed," the hunter said, voice low, carrying a deadly calm. "You think you can escape the desert's judgment?" Kahto shifted slightly, bow ready. "We do not trespass," he said firmly. "We survive, and we defend ourselves." The hunter's lips curled into a cruel smile. "We'll see." Suddenly, he lunged a blur of motion aimed at Rafe, but Kahto was faster, muscles coiling, releasing an arrow that struck true. The hunter staggered, but he did not fall. His speed and agility were unnatural, born of years mastering the desert's secrets. Seraphine's pulse raced, but she knew retreat was impossible. She drew her knife, heart pounding, and moved to flank him. Kahto's arrow forced the hunter back, giving her just enough space. Rafe drew his revolver, hand steady, firing with precision. The shots rang through the canyon, echoing off stone walls, but still the hunter advanced, relentless, untouchable. Kahto's voice cut through the chaos. "Seraphine, there's a weak point, follow me." Without hesitation, she obeyed. Kahto led the hunter toward a narrow gorge where the sun struck at an angle blinding the man. "Now!" Kahto shouted. Seraphine lunged, her knife slicing into the hunter's shoulder just as Kahto's arrow struck his leg. He fell to the sand, howling in fury and pain, clutching at his wounds. Rafe moved quickly to secure him, keeping him pinned. The hunter struggled, but it was over. For the first time, he seemed human, vulnerable, and defeated. Kahto lowered his bow, eyes never leaving the fallen man. The desert does not forgive, but it does offer mercy to those who survive. Seraphine exhaled, letting the tension drain from her body. Her hands were shaking, but she felt a surge of relief, of triumph, of something stronger, a connection to Kahto, to Rafe, and to the fierce will that had kept them alive. Rafe clapped Kahto on the shoulder. "I'll never doubt you again," he said, a half smile breaking through the grime and exhaustion. "You're more than legend." Kahto's lips twitched in the barest hint of a smile. "And you, Rafe, are sharper than I gave you credit for." Seraphine met Kahto's gaze, and in that look, unspoken words passed between them. Trust, respect, perhaps even something more. She had walked into the desert unsure of herself, yet she had emerged stronger, shaped by fire and danger, and bound to these two men by shared survival. The desert stretched around them, harsh and unyielding, but no longer threatening. They had faced the storm and survived. Together, the sun climbed higher, bathing the canyon in gold, and for the first time, the three of them allowed themselves a moment to breathe, to rest, and to savor the victory they had earned. Kahto adjusted the bow across his back. "We move forward," he said quietly, eyes scanning the horizon. "The desert still has its secrets, but for now, we've won this battle." Seraphine nodded, heart steady, knowing that whatever lay ahead, they would face it as one. The canyon, the sun, the wind, they were all witnesses to their endurance, their courage. And the bond forged in the harshest of places. And as the three of them rode together toward the distant horizon, the desert seemed to accept them no longer as intruders, but as survivors, unbroken, unbowed, and free. The storm had passed and a new day had begun.